White people don't have culture because white people is a concept that was created to justify the discrimination of black people in America. Before 1950, Irish people weren't considered white, and Italians were hung by the KKK, and today, Arab Americans are still legally considered white. Whiteness as a whole is an excuse. It's a way of both oppressing people of color by making them an outgroup, but also a way of getting rid of Irish culture and Germanic and Balkan culture, whatever, by forcing all white people to feed into the machine of imperialism and giving up their cultures in exchange for being in the in-group. If we want to fight against colonialism and imperialism, we need to fight against the excuse. We need to fight against capitalism and the whiteness that upholds it. So recognize your privilege as a white person while also embracing your true heritage. My ancestors were Irish, but I still benefit from being white in America because all of our histories were taken from us. I'm lucky that I even know where my ancestors are from because many black Americans do not have that privilege. So please fight against American culture and nationalism and do research about your ancestors. Fight against the concept of an in-group or out-group, not by denying its very real existence, but by pushing for change.
So I want to talk about this because I think it's something that gets misunderstood a lot. But when we say whiteness, we're talking about a power structure. We're not just talking about white people. Like, whiteness was literally made in order to oppose blackness. And originally it didn't even include Irish people or Italians or Jewish people. Those groups were racialized differently when they first arrived here, right? But whiteness didn't expand because those communities sat around and were like, oh, we want to be white. It's like, no, it expanded because the power structure needed more numbers. Like, after emancipation and Reconstruction, like, all of the wealthy white people in this country realized that if the poor Europeans aligned with black Americans, you'd have this cross-racial working class coalition, and that would just threaten their wealth and their ownership. So they expanded their racial category to include more people. They didn't do it to be kind, though. It was literally a political strategy. Because once you can create a racial hierarchy, you don't need white people to be rich. You just need them to believe that they're above someone else, which is exactly what Lyndon B. Johnson said. And that's why anti-blackness is what this country runs on. When we say that this country was built on the backs of black people, we literally mean that subordinating us became the floor that everything else stood on. And so many immigrants, they assimilated for safety. I get that. Like, blending in meant more access, protection, survival. And for some, I'm sure it meant participating in anti-blackness and benefiting from it, right? But they wanted to get access just like black Americans that fought for integration to gain access, because all of those things were held from them. They were held from us too. The difference is that black Americans never had the option to assimilate out of our race. And not that any of us would want to. Like, I love being black, but that was never available to us. Like, we're very visible. We can't blend in. So when black people now talk about people choosing whiteness over doing kind of what's right and equality, right? It's not, I mean, kind of is some blame, but it's about how you're choosing to participate in the system. Did you challenge it from within, or did you just benefit from it? And that's a really layered conversation that I think a lot of people are avoiding. But by and large, whiteness is the problem. And if dismantling whiteness, like as a power structure, feels like losing something, then it might tell you what you were gaining from it in the first place.
You know why it's so hard for a lot of white people to admit our complicity and active hand in racism and white supremacy and understand that systemic racism is real? Here's one of the reasons. Because if you as a white person begin to understand and believe that, that means your mom and dad were wrong. Your grandparents were wrong. Your teachers were wrong. Everything you've learned about history is wrong. The shit you've heard about cops is wrong. The entire foundation of this country that you know it to be, that has been taught to you, you will realize you were lied to. Everything you know about the criminal justice system schools, banks, fucking housing, credit, food deserts, the medical field, the mental health field. You're going to realize everything that you were taught about that shit if you've never addressed white supremacy or racism. You're going to understand internally, if you start to unpack that, all that shit was wrong. You've been lied to. This is why so many white people want to return to this perceived right to comfort, because it creates an internal panic. When you realize your entire fucking foundation was formed and created and uplifted upon lies, white supremacy, white violence, racism, dehumanization, you're going to deconstruct all of that shit if you choose to. And what you're going to be left with is yourself. And then you have to understand, I have to understand, the complicity in the active hand in the role that I carry out in racism, in white supremacy. And instead of saying, holy fuck, dude, I was wrong about everything. Everything was a lie. Everything, race really does play into everything. Instead of doing that, the gut reaction is to push back against people who have the Black, Indigenous, persons of color experience in this country, to push back against them and tell them that they don't know their history, that their life experience is wrong. You see how that's not logical at all? I always say, once you start pulling the string on the sweater, everything will fucking unravel. And that leads to an identity crisis, which will force you back into being comfortable so you don't have to address yourself, so you don't have to address your family members, so you don't have to address your friends or your churches. Or it will cause you to radically change to a point where you might lose everything, but will find your humanity instead. Choose your humanity. Choose to walk away from whiteness forever.
Whiteness was just not created. It was something that was planned. It was something that they literally want to use to make some certain people, like the Black Americans and also kind of people of color, feel some certain ways about themselves. But I'm going to be talking deep about it at the end of this video. Let me just allow these clips I have rolled out for you guys so that you guys can also get the points I'll be coming from whenever I'm saying whatever I want to say at the end of this video. Welcome back to the channel. My name is Sonia. Subscribe, like, comment, and share. And credit belongs to original creators of every single clips and stitches we have in our today's episode. I want to say a very big thank you to every single one of you liking, commenting, sharing, dropping super thanks, and also joining my membership. I do not take you guys for granted. You guys are absolutely the best. And guys, with that being said, let's dive right into this video. I'll be back with commentaries. So let's go watch, guys.
Why so many non-white people around the world want to be white or accepted by whites? Now, this is a provocative question. It's also a rhetorical question. I already know the answer to this question. And before you say, no, that's not true, I don't want to be white, I don't know anyone who wants to be white. So before you go down that road, let me just tell you, the data is overwhelming. Okay? So let's just face the fact that some serious psychological and mental damage has been done to non-white people by white people, causing many non-white people to subconsciously, at least subconsciously, want to be white or to be accepted by whites.
So I'm going to tell y'all something that's going to blow your motherfucking head off, especially white people today. I want you to take a good look at your skin. Look at your skin tone. I want you to take a really good look at it and ask yourself where you think it came from. And ask yourself, how old do you think the skin that you're looking at right now, that white, pale, some of it flaky, some of it itchy, some of it red, pink, some of it may be moisturized. Who knows? It might have a little vitamin D up in there. But I want you to take a good look at it and ask yourself, how old is this skin? Like, how long has it been the European standard for Europeans? And I'm going to answer that question for you. How old do you think white skin is? You're going to be shocked. It's about 3,000 to 6,000 years old. Early Caucasians from the Caucasus Mountains had dark skin and blue eyes. The white skin trait literally just became the standard about 3,000 to 6,000 years ago. Look it up. I lie to you not. Early Caucasians were dark skinned with blue eyes. They believed that there was a genetic adaptation because there was a lack of sunlight where they were, and the skin had a lack of vitamin D because they switched from vitamin D rich meat to vitamin D poor grains. And that is what mutated the skin into what it is. Now, you don't gotta take my word for it. Look this shit up. I am shocked myself. I thought it was gonna be, thousands. Well, I knew white people wasn't here longer than black people, but I thought that it was at least gonna say like 50,000 years or something like that. No. Only 3,000 to 6,000 years old is the white skin that we see today has been here. Yet they claim they're the original people. I don't know. I really don't know what to say about that.
We're going to talk about whiteness in a way that I haven't heard it in a lot of other places, but this is what went wrong. Like, if you ever wanted to know what went wrong, like, this is what went wrong. Like, what? Like, you ever looked at them and, wondered how they all made these crazy decisions? This is how it happened. Okay? Like, the betrayal was against memory itself. So, it didn't start with slavery or colonization. Those were actually symptoms of a greater issue. It began when white identity was constructed by erasing rootedness. European tribes like the Irish, the Scots, the Germans, the Norse, they did have indigenous ways of living, right? Of being. Seasonal living, oral storytelling, grief rituals, communal economies. When empire logic, Rome, Catholic Church, feudalism, consolidated power in Europe, it forced those people to forget their rootedness and to replace memory with domination. The root was severed, survival through control. They didn't metabolize anything, not connection, right? Just control again. This was the first recursion. This is when they turned in on themselves, right? The first rise of this unprocessed entropy inside whiteness. It's rootless survival. It's identity by domination. It's memory replaced by mythic supremacy. And then that's how you end up with expansion without metabolization. So when Europeans came to the New World, they didn't arrive whole, right? They arrived already severed, already looping. They didn't integrate the grief of losing old Europe. They exported it. They didn't mourn their exile from memory. They externalized it on the people they colonized. Conquest wasn't just greed, it was spiritual panic. Because if you're not rooted in memory, you only feel alive by expanding your domination, by making more land, more wealth, more slaves, more laws, more mirrors, and thus their entropy, their unprocessed experiences exploded. But it was coded as civilization. So when American identity was built, it wasn't metabolized selfhood. It was built on dumping these unprocessed experiences, these entropy onto others. So indigenous people got labeled uncivilized to offload their own severed ancestral memory, right? Black people were property to offload their terror of being spiritually homeless because they felt spiritually homeless. Immigrants were treated like threats to offload their fear of being spiritually replaceable. Projection became policy. Projection became culture. Projection became destiny. America never healed from Europe. It just renamed its wounds. So every genocide, right? Every stolen plantation, every gentrified city, every new suburb, every Wall Street boom, every school built on erasure, every church built without confession is material success reinforced. It is material success reinforced spiritual entropy. It is material success reinforcing, right, spiritual unprocessed experiences for them. So the more whiteness succeeded externally, the more it hollowed out internally. So their collective brokenness rose because every reward for survival was tied to a denial of memory, right? The maw grew, the silence deepened, the performance sharpened. So here's just the facts, right? It was really a bit of a 4-stage process. Severance from ancestral rootedness, loss of metabolized memory, survival through domination, entropy weaponizes progress, projection on the others, externalization of internal panic, and reinforcement through wealth. So that it looped, got hardened in the culture. So white America's original sin is not slavery. It's the refusal to mourn the first loss of rootedness. So this is all just a disgusting projection. It's really this humiliating. Like I want people to sit with that. Like, we're watching them grieve in public. All of this is grief. All of it. Rape, slavery, genocide, imperialism. Those were the fevered dreams of a people trying not to remember what it felt like to be abandoned by their own history. So every time memory tried to return, they doubled the performance instead of softening. This is why black people look so nasty to them. Because if we can build a culture, even in the midst of that, of exile, it makes all of this grief look meaningless. It has to be destroyed in that way, right? So they have no home. You ask a black person where it all starts from. You might say you might get answers like slavery in Africa. You ask a white person, you'll hear Europe. Okay, but you hear exactly the same. Africa, Europe, they're as disconnected, if not worse, and they've been materially rewarded for it through this reinforcement. So this was a crazy deep take, but this is exactly what's going on, for sure.
Past year, America has demonstrated and reiterated that whiteness is a construct that the rich white elite made up, and they can take it away from people on a whim. To be clear, there was no white race in Europe. There were British and French and Germans and Italians. Their whiteness did not unify them or align their interests. Rather, these divergent groups of white people in Europe spent over 2,000 years attacking each other and going to war. It wasn't until the advent of the New World, and specifically the African slave trade, that was its economic engine, that the notion of a white race ever emerged. And it was not done altruistically by the white elites, but rather out of greed, necessity, and self-preservation. Being woefully outnumbered by black people and the poor whites throughout the South, the white elite needed a way to divide and conquer, and also to placate these poor, uneducated, disenfranchised whites. Indeed, there were acts of rebellion and protest where poor whites and enslaved black people stood together. By creating the myth of whiteness, the white elites were able to distract poor whites from the true source of their misery, the white land-owning rich elites, to focus on a people who were the only rung on the economic ladder worse off than them. And even then, there were levels to whiteness. The Irish and the Italians sat solidly below the WASP. And it worked. It worked during slavery. It worked in the sharecropping era that followed. It worked during Jim Crow. And it works today, where poor, uneducated, disenfranchised whites voted for a billionaire with nothing in common with them and no interest in them. The myth of whiteness pays dividends to the white aristocracy to this very day. But recent events have shown that just like whiteness can be granted, it can be taken away. Now, it's common white folks being murdered, and the supposed club of whiteness is nowhere to be found. The white elites have rescinded it, and these common white folks' eyes are being opened to the fact that they are not in the club. Actually, they never have been and never will be.
There is a difference between white people and people who happen to be white. White people ascribe to whiteness, especially in the US. They have privilege because of the color of their skin, and they don't acknowledge that. people who happen to be white are doing the work. They're trying to decolonize themselves. They're trying to unpack all of that white supremacy, capitalism nonsense that we've been force-fed since birth. I grew up in a multiracial household, and when I went to school as a child, I assumed everyone's household was like mine. Everyone has a black mom and a white dad. Everyone has black siblings and white siblings. Wrong. The other students made that very clear to me, that I was the weird one. I'm in my 40s. It has taken me this long to see it, glaringly see it. I saw it before, but I work with a lot of white women, a lot of white cishet women. And, you know, they're progressive. It's Washington State. Pro this, pro that. Except when it comes to genocide. They made that very clear to me that they don't want me to talk about it anymore. They didn't say those words, but they made it pretty clear. And the fact that they can just dismiss what's happening to the people in Palestine. It's hailing. That's not going to stop me. I can see now very clearly that these white women who ascribe to whiteness would be the same white women back in the day who are like, slavery, what are you going to do? Civil rights movement, they're destroying property. Those are the same people. They are. I know a lot of people who happen to be white who are allies, real allies. And by the way, you as a white person can't come into any marginalized community saying, I'm an ally. The marginalized community has to deem you an ally. You can't give yourself that title. Washington Weather doesn't want me to talk about this, but y'all need to work on yourselves. If you are a white person who ascribes to whiteness, you need to figure that shit out. The hailing stopped. Y'all, white people, y'all don't care about what's going on currently in Rafah. Do you even know that there's a ground invasion right now? Do you understand what's happening? Y'all don't care because it doesn't affect you. But it will, very soon. And that's not me threatening. That's our government sending our police force over there to train, to see how they do that over there, so that they can implement that. You see it at the campuses right now. They're beating up children, young people, macing them. People who happen to be white, thank you for doing the work, but you got to go talk to your folks. They'll listen to you, hopefully. And if they don't, write their name down. And then we'll remember. We'll remember them. So, have a good day.
You know, when I first saw this, I thought it was some sort of practical joke. But after doing a little research, I found out it's 100% true. The University of Minnesota has a webpage describing whiteness as a pandemic. Yes, you heard me. Whiteness is a pandemic. Let's take a look at what they consider a white pandemic is. There you go. Read through it. And you could read down at the bottom that they're facing backlash for it. I wonder why. Now let me show you how they want white parents to halt and stop this white pandemic. Let's take a look at this. There you go. How to stop white pandemic. They want white parents to re-educate their children. Re-educate their children from what? Being white? Are you kidding me? Now let's take a listen to this University of Minnesota professor talking about what a white pandemic is.
We posit that there is a whiteness pandemic behind the racism pandemic, and that this begins in the family system where young children are socialized into the culture of whiteness within white families. Our first recommendation is to remember that the whiteness pandemic is a pandemic. If you were born and raised in the United States, especially in a white family, then you've been raised in the pandemic, and you can play a role in halting and reversing this pandemic.
Are you kidding me? Are you serious? There's two pandemics I'm seeing. The first one is the fact that individuals in high school around this country in certain cities can't read first grade reading or do first grade math. That's a pandemic. Number two is the pandemic of white people being blamed for everything and the hate directed towards white people. That's another pandemic. Does this professor and the University of Minnesota think that this is going to bring people together? Clearly not, because they're facing a backlash from it. This is one of the most racist things I've seen and heard directed towards an entire race of people.
You gotta fuck with me for a minute. This is what Attica Torrance had to say on Facebook. I've said this before and I'll say it again. Whiteness has tricked white people into believing they were included in whiteness. The truth is, whiteness only cares about those that portray the tenets of whiteness. Here are 2 points that bolsters the main point. Kash Patel, Usha Vance, Ted Cruz, Marco Rubio, and many others are not white, but they are willing to protect and defend whiteness. Thus, they are accepted in whiteness. Renee Good and Alex Preddy getting killed in Minneapolis was technically white, but they were not included in whiteness. That brings me to my next point. For a very long time, whiteness didn't want to market and advertise to white death. Therefore, although white people get shot and killed by law enforcement, we rarely see it advertised on the news or on any grand scale. We typically see law enforcement killing black children, black women, black men, black babies, black elders in their own homes, in their own cars, on playgrounds, in Walmart, etc., etc. Well, now, whiteness is willing to market and advertise white death, protect it, defend it, obfuscate it, the law, and even lie to you if white death is what it takes to defend whiteness. Whiteness wants you to know your life is irrelevant when it comes to protecting whiteness. Whiteness trumps you being white. Kyle Rittenhouse was an agent of whiteness. The January 6 folks were all agents of whiteness. That's why they are protected. The folks in Minnesota were countering whiteness, so they will continuously market and advertise them getting shot in the face or lying on the ground unarmed and getting shot multiple times by multiple defenders of whiteness. They are marketing and advertising white death. America hasn't done that as long as I can remember. I don't ever recall seeing an unarmed white man, woman, child, or elder getting brutally killed by law enforcement on television the way we've seen Sonia Massey, Tamir Rice, Sandra Bland, John Crawford III, Michael Brown, Philando Castile, George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and many others get killed on camera. Now we're seeing white people get murdered on camera. Do with that information what you will. But this is very different. White people getting executed for all to see is top tier level butt breaking. The world is watching and it doesn't translate well. America is imploding and the strength of this empire is being questioned. Just my thought. Stay alert. Stay alive. Attica J. Torrance on Facebook. But this right here, I have to read it again. But this is very different. White people getting executed for all to see is top tier level puff breaking. Attica bars.
Beautiful people, it's not your fault you didn't learn it. They never taught it. It's not a coincidence that many of us don't understand the difference between white people, white supremacy, and whiteness. I think it's about time we change that, don't you? Today we're going to start with white people. Who are white people? Where did they come from? How did this happen? Next, we're going to talk about white supremacy and whiteness. Make sure you like and follow so you don't miss those videos. All right, so this thing called white people. A lot of folks think if you look like me, you got skin color like this, you were just white, and that's how it's always been. But nothing could be further from the truth. See, white people didn't exist before this event. That event is called Bacon's Rebellion, and it happens in Jamestown, Virginia. You might have heard of Bacon's Rebellion, because history books will tell you that it's like the precursor to the revolution, and it's a demonstration of America's independent spirit. And I'm not here to tell you that that's not true. What I am here to tell you is that's not the whole truth, and it's not the most important thing about that event. At the time in Jamestown, rich Anglo-Saxons, folks we would now call white, were exploiting and oppressing indentured servants from Europe, free Africans from Africa, and enslaved Africans. Rich folks taking advantage of poor folks. That sound familiar? So Nathaniel Bacon organizes all of them, and they give it to the English for a whole year. So much so that Governor William Berkeley has to reach out to King George and be like, yo, we need help. And King George sends the Navy. But he don't do that without some reassurances, right? Because they don't want to do these endless wars. So he asks, how are you going to keep this from happening again? The answer that they had for the English crown was divide and conquer via the creation of race. This is where white people come from. Now, before you write me off as crazy, yes, of course, there were people who looked like me in Europe, but we didn't call each other white. We didn't think about ourselves as white. We didn't see our common interest as white people. We didn't talk about ourselves as white people. We were multi-ethnic, had diverse languages, diverse beliefs, diverse cultures, diverse customs, all of that. We did not have a collective identity as white people. Therefore, white people didn't exist. Now, here's where it gets really tricky, because not everybody who looked like me was included in the category of whiteness, right? I'm Irish, and this is how whiteness thought about Irish folks. You might be thinking, oh, yeah, I heard this story about Irish folks, but they're a outlier. This is how whiteness thought about Polish folks. See, whiteness required adherence to a worldview. And that worldview required the dehumanization of native folks and African people. And immigrants from Europe would have to prove that they could get down with the poison, the violence, the disconnection, and the disease of whiteness before they could be considered white. That is where white people come from. Now, is that something that you really want to partake in? All right, y'all, that's white people. If you want a more in-depth, check out the YouTube. We're going to be following this up with what do we mean by white supremacy and what is whiteness? Make sure you like, follow, and don't forget to send this to somebody that needs to hear. A little PS. If you're wondering what to do, just ask yourself what John Brown would do.
Might be a hot take, but if America wants to actually heal, we need to completely end the concept of whiteness. White people like to cling to this idea that we are inherently a superior race. The concept of whiteness wasn't invented until the 17th century. Even then, it was only used to justify oppression of people based off their skin color. So you could easily identify who was somebody in power and who wasn't. If you saw a white person walking down the street versus a black or brown person, you can immediately assume social status, which if you're trying to extract wealth from those individuals, makes it very easy to tell the place of those people. That's why I think it's so ridiculous when people are like, oh, white people are superior, because we literally could not do anything throughout history by ourselves. We had to have black and brown people do it for us because we're so fucking incompetent. Whiteness isn't real. It's a social construct made up under capitalism to exploit wealth and extract resources. You are not special because you have lighter skin. You are not God's chosen people because you have light skin. Even calling yourself a white person doesn't even make any fucking sense, because it was something that was created relatively recently and only under the basis of creating a system of slavery and oppression. The concept of race as a whole is completely made up. So shut the fuck up.
I don't know how I got on this side of TikTok, but it's rather interesting. I love history and science. That's one of my favorite subjects growing up in school. And we all know that Neanderthals are the predecessors of white people in this country, in this world, period. And we all knew that from school. They said there were 2 to 5% of modern day white people. But this woman broke it down even further. I don't know how I got on this side, but I was so glued in last night. Basically, she's saying that the Neanderthal mothers just vanished. Like, then that's an unnatural of human evolution, period. You don't just vanish out of nowhere. They saying the male Neanderthal was able to crossbreed with a Homo sapien, black people, Africans, whatever you want to call us, it doesn't matter. But it's rather interesting because usually when a lion and a tiger, like a liger, like, you know, when you crossbreed, the child comes out sterile. So I'm thinking, listen, if we're only 2 to 5% of DNA sequences only in modern day humans, that tells me one thing, and it only shows up in hair and skin complexion. This is by design. They have a creator. Someone created white people. It's not, because it's impossible. Like, the only thing that would show up in the DNA is hair and skin complexion. There's no other sequences anywhere else. That's by design. That's not natural. That's not how anything natural works. So not only they were able to crossbreed with other humanoid people on this planet, but they were also only able to keep a certain match of DNA for changes that we can see visibly today, which is hair and skin complexion. And there is no chromosome Y in their blood, in their DNA at all. No chromosome Y. So where's the mothers? The mothers just disappeared, vanished. So there is no connection to a Neanderthal mother in modern day humans. That means no Homo sapien black person, a man, crossbreeded with a Neanderthal woman. It was only in reverse. It was only man with a black woman who made white people. It's so interesting. Like, I don't know why we never were taught this. I mean, I don't know why. It doesn't make sense. But you could tell it's by design. There's literally something created. Because that's just down to the T. But we leave a little left just to make these minor changes. Well, not minor changes, but also I think she said metabolism too. That they have a different metabolism in their DNA than normal Homo sapiens, whatever. But this is very interesting, y'all. So I don't know. That was my little rabbit hole for the day.
Anyways, welcome back, guys, and thank you so much for watching. One, whiteness was created to divide poor people, right? So in the 90s, especially in colonial America, poor Europeans, English, Irish, etc., enslaved Africans and indigenous people. At first, poor Europeans and Africans sometimes worked together and even rebelled together. A major example is the Bacon Rebellion, where both black and white laborers unite against the elites, the ruling elites, right? Now, after that rebellion, wealthy landowners realized something dangerous. If poor Europeans and Africans unite, they could overthrow the system. So what did the elite do? They created a new identity, which is white, and gave poor Europeans special privilege. Now, the special privilege includes the legal freedom, the land opportunities, and then the protection under law. This splits from the black people, the black Americans, even if they were both poor. You see where the idea of whiteness started coming from, right? They were scared that black Americans might take over. The fact that we are trying to come together to fight against the ruling elites, the people in power. These people are stronger than us. So if we keep doing what we are doing with these people, they might literally overpower us and take over in future. So what do? Let's create that particular name called white, so that whenever we say white, we know that these are people with high class. These are people that will have the land opportunities. These are people that will have some certain privilege. And this is where the ideas of the stupid privilege I literally do not know that it exists come from. Let's talk about the second one, where it was used to justify slavery. Now, slavery needed a strong justification to continue. So a racial hierarchy was built. White equals to superior and black equals to inferior, where thinkers and writers promote ideas that Africans were naturally suited for slaveries. None of this influential justification come from people like Thomas. One of the most influential justification came from people like Thomas Jefferson, who express belief about racial differences. Now, this was based on real science. It was created to make slavery seem natural, to reduce guilt and resistance, to turn economic exploitation into racial order. Now, let's talk about the third one, where it protects wealth and power. Whiteness became a political tool. Now, poor white people were given a sense of superiority instead of economic equality. They were less likely to unite with black people against the wealthy elites. Now, this is often called a divide and rule strategies, where instead of rich versus poor, society was reframed as white versus black. The fourth one, where it became law and policy, where over time, whiteness was written into law. Only white people could own lands in many areas. Only white men could vote early on. Only citizenship law favors white immigrants. A key example is the Naturalization Act of the 1790s, which limits citizenship to free white person. Now, the fifth one, where it expanded to include more groups, where interestingly many groups were considered whites. Many groups we consider whites today were not always accepted as whites, such as Irish, Italians, and Jewish. Over time, they were gradually included into whiteness to strengthen the majority group and maintain control. They were initially not recognized as whites. Do you get? But now they have to add them, because if they don't add them, the black population is going to overpower them. Now, where are they going to be getting the control? You see, that was what formed all of this idea of segregation, Jim Crow, all of the red linings that you guys actually saw. Now, the sixth one, where it shaped culture and identity, where whiteness became more than legal. It became a social standard, beauty, language, behavior. It becomes a cultural norms. What is normal or American? Now, this include media, education, religion, and economic opportunities. The seventh one, where it still affects you today, where even though laws have changed, especially from the civil rights movement, the legacy of whiteness still affects white gap, education access, policy and justice system, representation of power. Now, whiteness in America was created to prevent unity among the poor. But was it? To justify and sustain slavery, to protect elites' wealth and power, to create a control social hierarchy, and to legally define who has the right and who do not, to stabilize the system over generations. Whiteness is not just about skin color. It is a historical system of power and classification that evolved to serve economic and political interests. And that is why even up till now, some people can still hit their chest and tell you we are white, we rule, we are in control. Why at the end of the day, we are not seeing any privilege? The privilege was then, because right now, I don't see privilege. In fact, if you talk about privilege where I am as a white person, I'm going to make sure I bring history on your head from here to two. It's as simple as ABC. I'm not seeing any privilege that you have, because even right now, most of these black Americans have privilege more than some of these white folks. But anyways, what do I know? Let me know what you think in the comment section, and credits belong to the original creators of every single clips and stitches we have in our today's episode. I want to say a very big thank you to every single one of you, liking, commenting, sharing, dropping super thanks, and also joining my membership. I do not take you guys for granted. You guys are absolutely the best, and thank you so much for staying stick and hook with me to the end of this video. And yes, guys, with that being said, with no further ado, I do like I always say in my videos, I'm going to be seeing by, and I'll see you guys in my next one. For now, bye guys. I love you guys. Mwah.